What is going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as J Monster, and thank you for joining me for another Third Age Reforged replay battle. This one is a 3 versus 3 scenario done up by paladinbob, the legend himself, and it is awesome. It is absolute bedlam here in the city of Osgiliath, which is defending itself from Gondor. This is Gondor fighting Gondor. You can see it, trebuchet volleys flying overhead. It's going to be pretty nuts. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a historical breakdown because, as I said, this is a historical battle that takes place during the Kin-strife, which is a civil war that took place in Gondor during the Second Age, pitting the forces of King Eldacar versus those of Castamir the Usurper King. And it's going to be pretty freaking cool, let me tell you. So without any further ado, let's get right into the historical breakdown, and then we can do the army compositions, then we can jump right into the battle. Hope you guys enjoy it. The year is 1432, and Gondor is a house divided. With support from the Southern Fiefdoms, Castamir the Usurper has risen up against his king in order to protect the purity of the Numenorean line. Opposing him is the rightful king of Gondor, Eldacar, the half-Numenorean son of Valacar. Eldacar was fearless in his opposition to those who would depose him, but when civil war erupted in 1432, the rebels moved against Osgiliath, the then capital of Gondor. Eldacar's armies were defeated, and he was forced to flee to Rhovanion, his mother's country. Castamir sacked the city and hunted down Eldacar's heir Ornendil, and had him cruelly put to death. This battle is only the start of the Kin-strife, as the conflict would later be known. A devastating civil war that spent much of the Numenorean blood left in Gondor and threw the realm into a decline that it would take over 1,000 years and the appearance of a new king to recover from. Alright, so because of the way that deployment works in this scenario, it does necessitate a small change in the way that we do our army breakdowns. Instead of doing an integral list army by army, I'm going to do it by section of the battlefield. So troops that are present in an area, we'll just go over them. And that's because there are so many different deployment zones. If you look up there in the minimap, I've got 3 deployment zones to myself. So both the defending and the attacking armies are a little bit kind of spread out all over the place. So I think this is a more organic way to do it that makes a lot more sense. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into the army compositions. The first attacking Gondorian force is under the command of Vislok. He's got some free men here. These are light infantry with AP, pretty decent at hacking their way through Gondor shield line. He's got a couple units of sword militia, 1 unit of catapult. He's also got some Gondor spears, some peasant archers, a large number of Pelargir marines, and the reason for this is because Castamir's power base was largely centered in the southern fiefdom known as the Pelargir. He's also got a couple units of hillmen here. I think 2 here, 1 on the other side. They're essentially peasants with spears thrust into their hands. And he's got some Gondor infantry as well. Moving on over here, he's got a couple units of cavalry mixed in amongst myself and my other allies. He's got 2 units of Gondor cavalry militia right here, alongside my the best of the cavalry in this force, the Serpent Guard and the Southron Lancers. Moving on to the next attacking army, we have Man of Wan Wei, who has 2 units of Gondor cavalry militia there to back up the rest of the cavalry forces, and a very strange Gondorian force over here. They have 12 cave trolls. I don't know if there's any historical, quote-unquote, historical precedent for that. I think they might just be there to help the Gondorians be able to push their way through a lot of the elite forces on the inside of the Citadel. He's got some Gondor infantry, I think about 3 or 4 units, a large number of Pelargir marines for the same reason that Vislok has them, a unit of spear militia there commanding the ram, and I think he's got some Athelian rangers. I'm not sure why. I think this might just be to give his army a little bit more of an elite presence, because they are sorely lacking in high-tier soldiers. But as far as I know, Athelian sided with Eldacar in the Kin-strife. But anyway, he's got some Gondor militia, more Gondor infantry, and a couple units of Blackroot Vale archers here, alongside 1 or 2 units of sword militia. Moving on now to the third and final attacking army that is being commanded by yours truly. This is the Kingdom of Harad. These are, I think, mostly forces that would come out of Umbar, so there's a lot of Haradrim, there's a lot of Corsairs. But anyway, I've got 2 units of Corsair Pikes, 2 or 3 units of Corsair Savages, 3 or 4 units of just the regular Corsairs light infantry, high damage, low armor. I've also got some Corsair Blackguards who are just sexy. Look at these guys. And their javelins can do a ton of damage, and they're no slouch in melee afterwards as well. I've got some Hashara Shadows, which are 2 HP archers, really not to be trifled with. They have a lot of staying power and a lot of damage, both at range and in close combat. I've also got some Corsair Warriors and Catapults, yet more Corsairs, and over here is the best of my army. 3 units of Castamir's Rangers alongside 3 units of Castamir's Chosen, and a Serpent Bodyguard unit. This is, I assume, to represent Castamir himself, so that would be him, dressing like, I would assume, his Haradrim subjects. But anyway, that about does it for the attacking armies. Let's move on now to the defenders. Contesting the largely rebel-held western portion of Osgiliath, we have a very vicious army here under paladinbob. He's got a unit of Citadel Guard here on the front lines, a few units of Gondor militia to back them up, a couple units here of Rhovanion hunters. These are they're kind of like more medium infantry, I think, than heavy infantry. They also have some javelins, which I think is the biggest allure of this unit. Those javelins can do a ton of AP damage to heavy infantry if they are positioned correctly. He's also got a unit of General's Bodyguard, which is like a 2 HP killing machine, not to be underestimated in close combat. He's also got a couple units here of Gondor Infantry, some Rhovanion Spearmen, one here, one on the other side of the wall, a couple units of Rhovanion Gadrots as well. I think these are to represent some theoretical Northmen units who would be willing to fight for Eldacar, since he is technically half Northman. But anyway, he's also got some more Gondor Militia, a Trebuchet, and some Archer Militia here to back up that entire force. Over on the other side of the wall, he's got some Archer Militia, but they kind of look like Bremen. So again, I assume another contingent of Northmen, and a unit here of Rhovanion Spearmen to hold this little choke point. Opposing our cavalry force outside the walls, paladinbob has a unit of Tearthair Knights, one unit of Doran Urnal Lancers, some A-Raid Horse Archers, yet again I assume more Northmen, and some Gondor Cavalry. Moving over here, we can take a look at some of the cavalry from his allies. We've got some Eowathuda Horse Guards under Rules 1. He's also got some Rhovanion Riders and some A-Raid Heavy Lancers, again, more Northmen. He's also got a General's Bodyguards and some Riddermark Skirmishers, and I think that's pretty well it. A couple units here, maybe, of Riddermark Skirmishers. We had a lot of cavalry under Rules, and almost an equally impressive amount under paladinbob. Moving in now to the inside of the city, take a look at some of the defending armies. We have an army here under Archangel. He's got some Gondor Militia, a large number of Gondor Infantry. He has by far, I think, the most professional army of the three defending forces. As you can see, he's got a lot of Gondor Heavy Infantry, a lot of Spearmen, and a ton of Guards of Osgiliath. He's also got a few units of Militia, some Archer Militia as well, to round off his ranged force. Over here, we've got some more professional Gondorian archers, a unit of Trebuchet, and a couple units of Guards of Osgiliath, who I think are here basically because they can very easily defend this choke point from any assaults. Yet more Gondor archers over here, and yet more Guards of Osgiliath. So you can see that his force is one to be feared by any standard. Finally, he's got a unit of General's Bodyguard hanging out here in the center. I assume that this is supposed to be Eldacar's main force, so this would probably be the General Bodyguard protecting the King of Gondor himself. He's also got a single unit of Citadel Guard. Moving on over here, we can take a look at the bulk of Rules 1's force. He's got some Archer Militia, a Trebuchet. He's also got a Catapult hanging out in here somewhere. He's got a unit of Guards of Osgiliath, rather, to protect the main gate. Some Gondor Infantry, some Gondor Spearmen, yet more Gondor Infantry. And over here, we've got some of his better units. Not these two Militia that are under his command as well, but this unit of Dismounted Swan Knights. A very healthy unit of 2 HP Heavy Infantry, not to be underestimated at all. Back in the map, he's got a unit of Archer Militia, and that's pretty well it, I think, for the defenders. I've got a couple units of Rhovanion Hunters back here as well. Again, more Northmen, more Javelin men. So these guys on the defense can be extremely useful, so I'm going to have to be very careful with how I deploy my troops to the walls. But that basically does it for the army compositions. Let's go ahead and let's jump right into the replay. And so begins the first battle for the Kin-strife. You can see paladinbob and his archers here, or his cavalry rather, falling back inside of the city. Rules has already done the same, thereby leaving the field open to our cavalry, which honestly isn't the worst idea. There is no reason for them to get involved in a frontal assault against our cavalry and Man of Wanway's army, which would likely result in a lot of dead horsemen on their sides. Over here, you can see there's a river and a red line that really prevents our cavalry from moving anywhere. So by going inside of the city instead of fighting us in the field, they deny us usage of our cavalry, essentially, giving themselves local superiority in cavalry elsewhere in the battlefield where those units can be better used. Moving over here, you can see my army having to rush forward towards the walls, and that is because of the presence of Rules' Trebuchet right here. The range on this Trebuchet is so great that there's nowhere that I can hide in here. My entire deployment zone is covered by the range of that Trebuchet, so it is do or die. I've got to storm the walls and hope things go well for my army. And Rules is quite nicely entrenched, so things could get very, very bloody. I am now moving forward, looking to knock down that gate and get into the city, giving myself multiple means of ingress into the city. Over here, Valacar has now sent forward some of his heavy axemen. You can see some artillery battles going on in the background. Strangely enough, those giant flaming fireballs are flying right through the lines. You can see they are reaping a terrible, terrible harvest amongst the ranks of paladinbob's infantry. But over here, his infantry is really struggling to push through these Rhovanion spearmen, which honestly I'm a little bit surprised by. The heavy axemen are heavily armored and they are AP. These Rhovanion spearmen, I think, are quite lightly armored in comparison. It may be that they have a very high defense skill. In any case, the archer militia companies between paladinbob and Valacar exchanging fire here. firing through the buildings. Apparently these guys have the accuracy of elven archers. They're able to just fire through those windows, through another set of windows, and hit their foes on the other side. Over here, Vislax, oh, it looks like his catapult has taken some early casualties here. That's a little bit unfortunate. Oh, we might see another one. Oh, very close, though. Oh, yes, definitely that trebuchet shot coming through this cathedral wall, taking down another one of Vislax's catapults. He is now down to half strength, essentially, on his catapult unit very, very early in the game, and that is extremely deadly. I think the trebuchet has a little bit of an advantage in this fight because it has a nice, graceful arc over the tops of the rooftops and the buildings, thereby missing most of the things that would get in its way. Oh, another nice shot there. Yeah, landing into some poor man's living room. I feel sorry for that particular Gondorian peasant. Moving back over here, let's slow it down just a little bit because there's a ton of stuff happening right now. I've managed to get a large number of my Corsairs onto the wall. This is really important because Rules was not able to contest this particular ford with me quick enough, allowing my much faster, much lighter Corsair infantry to slip away. He is now moving some of his Gondor militia onto the wall, trying to check the advance of these Corsairs, but I think they're going to be fast enough to evade all of these Gondorian warriors who are now arrayed against them. Over here, I'm trying to keep Rules busy in as many places as possible, trying to break his micro so that I can potentially slip some forces through here. Because one of the things I forgot to mention earlier is that the walls are a little bit buggy. While I do have a catapult and I could potentially knock them down, there's no way for me to get through them. The breach would be bugged and effectively unusable for my forces. So I've got to rush forward, open up as many means of ingress into the city as possible, and just try and open up some gaps in Rules' line. I've now managed to batter down the gate, leaving Rules' unit here very, very open to a javelin volley. I have my Blackguard ready to follow up with a 1-2 punch after that gate, after the gate had fallen. And you can see those guards of Osgiliath taking a lot of damage. I think we might see one more volley here. Come on, do it! Just one more, and there it is. I think it's about this time the Rules realizes the predicament that his guards of Osgiliath are in, and he's now going to begin to fall them back as quickly as possible. See some trebuchet fire going in to his own tower, it would appear. Not really doing any damage, luckily for Rules. My Corsairs up on the wall have now been pinned in place by a couple units of Gondor militia. Really nice positional play here by Rules, but unfortunately, the Corsairs are strong enough to stand up to this Gondor militia for quite some time. They have a decent melee defense skill and a lot more damage than the very lightly armed and poorly trained Gondor militia. So even though they are surrounded right now, they are still going to reap a bloody harvest amidst the ranks of these Gondor militia. Moving back over here to the paladinbob Vislac fight. Vislac is now moving up with some Corsairs of his own, taking on these Rhovanion spearmen and cutting them apart. Look at this. There's still some heavy axemen here spearheading the assault, but these Corsairs are going to be the backup that they need. Very, very easy for them to penetrate the high defense skill of the Rhovanion spearmen with their high attack values. On the back here, you can see Vislac moving more and more of his forces forward. It looks like he was firing into the ranks of the Citadel Guard who were contesting this right. This is the left flank of Paladinbob's army. Taking some light casualties here before falling back beyond the wall. Moving a little bit over here, you can see Man of One Way now has his assault underway, but he's meeting with a little bit of early disaster. One of his siege towers here is now on fire. I assume it took a couple of trebuchet shots from Archangel's trebuchets, nestled very nicely back there, farther back in the city. So that's really unfortunate for his siege tower, but that kind of lightning doesn't often strike twice, so he's going to be able to move forward with the rest of his towers and begin his assault on the city. He's really going to have his work cut out for him, though, because Man of One Way has one of the lower tier armies, and he has to fight Archangel's army. Archangel is a very experienced player, and he also has the most professional army available to Gondor on this battlefield at his disposal. It's going to be a really tough fight, I think, for Man of One. Moving back over here, you can see more and more of my forces beginning to pour themselves onto the wall. Got some reinforcements moving in for my Corsairs, who are very much beleaguered here, being shot by towers on the other side and pressed hard by the Gondor militia. But luckily there is some help on the way. Another unit of Corsairs moving up onto the wall, looking to give them a little bit of help. Over here, it looks like Rules has opened up another gap in his line. I think some of my poor Corsair warriors who were manning this tower got themselves clipped by the trebuchet, but I managed to get most of them by the Gondorian forces now onto the second to the second floor rather, and they're now menacing his archer militia, and his trebuchet has been silenced. He's going to move in with some of his air and heavy lancers, but luckily for my warriors, they're not going to be able to get a nice charge off because of the presence of these trebuchets blocking their clearest route into the rear of my infantry. My infantry is going to pursue these archer militia as far as they can, trying to disrupt his skirmish line as much as possible. He has now opened up another gap here in his line with the retreat of his Osgiliath guardsmen. It looks like Wanwei is now in the city, so his assault can begin in earnest. But over here at Rules' Gate, he has moved back his Osgiliath, as is a very wise decision. Because if he had left him there, I've got a catapult right out front. I've also got a unit of javelins that would tear them apart. But unfortunately for him, this has opened up another gap in his line, which I think we're going to try and exploit in just a moment here. Funneling more forces now onto the wall. Some Corsair pikemen looking to assist these poor Corsair warriors who are now just getting pummeled in retreat by these Gondor militia. Let's go ahead and let's slow it down just a little bit and go ahead and take a look at how Man of Wanwei is faring over here on the southern gate. He's brought now his Pelargir Marines close to the wall, looking to throw some javelin volleys through this gatehouse into the waiting massed troops of Archangel's infantry. I don't think Archangel sees what is going on here because these poor troops are taking just so much damage. These Guards of Osgiliath, especially the Guards of Osgiliath being pikemen and not having a shield bonus, are very... Ooh, I wonder what that was all about. Oh, a nice trebuchet shot from Archangel, taking down a lot of those Gondor infantry. But as I was saying, the Guards of Osgiliath and pikemen in general are very, very vulnerable to javelin volleys like this. They have no defense against it. Most of their defense comes either from their armor or from their melee defense, both of which are heavily negated by a javelin volley. Look at that. Those poor Guards of Osgiliath just taking so much damage. Man of Wanwei now moving down with some of his Gondor infantry, looking to flank these Guards of Osgiliath and these spearmen, pinning them in place, allowing his Pelargir Marines to continue their bloody work. Moving back over here, we can see the fight between paladinbob and Vislac has cooled down just a little bit. Vislac now firmly in control of this choke point, continuously bombarding paladinbob's position. Looks like he managed to take down one of his trebuchets. I wonder if that shot's going to get anything, though. Just traveling right through all of those buildings, and unfortunately for him, missing Vislac's catapults, who are now free to continuously fire. But since Vislac is now in control of that central plaza, he is able to funnel troops over here, circumventing this barricade that has been erected on this main street. He's now moving in with a unit of his Corsairs, looking to take on these Gondor... Oh, looks like we're getting a little bit of lag. Looking to take on these Gondor militia in close combat, but paladinbob has his own surprise for him, and a large number of Rhovanion hunters tossing their javelin payloads into those Corsairs, who are just getting massacred by it. That is so unfortunate. On their own, these Corsairs, I think, would do very well against his militia, but paladinbob is definitely well prepared for that assault. Moving back over here, I've tried to exploit that gap in Rules' line by moving in a unit of my Corsair Savages, looking to silence some of these Archer militia. Unfortunately for me, Rules has a couple units of Gondor Archers in support who are going to be able to have a clear lane of fire into the flanks of my very, very lightly armored Corsair Savages. The bonus, though, is that I have managed to silence these Archer militia again and bring these guys into position to potentially be bombarded with more javelins. Up here, Rules has seen the gap in his lines, and now he is moving to close it, moving 2 units of Gondor infantry to catch my Corsair pikemen before they can form themselves up. My Corsair pikes, however, have set their sights on that general's bodyguard. These pike units could absolutely destroy them if they're lucky. Now moving in behind, I've got my unit of Corsair warriors effectively trying to trap his general. If I can take down this general very, very quickly, and then I can do a lot of damage to the morale and staying power of Rules' army. So, yeah, this is definitely a big, a little bit of a micro mistake, I think, on the part of Rules, and a big opportunity for my forces. Rules now moving up to reinforce the rest of his line with another artillery piece. He's got his catapult here now, in addition to his trebuchet, and a large number of cavalrymen in the event that I manage another breakthrough. So things looking really grim for me right here. My poor Corsair Savages being absolutely cut down by that arrow fire and by a big push now from the Guards of Osgiliath. We're going to go ahead and we're going to speed up just a little bit and see how Man of Wanwei's assault is going. Not so great for him, unfortunately. His Gondor infantry now have been driven back. They are a mere 3 or 4, now 2 left in that unit, being completely annihilated. A unit of Pelargir Marines here is going to make their sacrifice very much worthwhile, backed up by some archers. You can see a ton of javelin and arrow fire coming into this gatehouse, claiming the lives of many of these bunched up Gondorian heavy infantry. Oh, a very, very narrow miss there by Archangel's Trebuchet. That could have been devastating. That might have torn out the heart of his infantry force at the gate. But Man of One Way does have a few options here. It looks like he's got... No, those are Archangel's Gondor militia. So Archangel has now checked any more movement coming through that siege tower. He can pin them in place with his Gondor militia and use his Trebuchet to bombard them. It's a clear shot. Really, really easy thing for him to do. I can see a little bit of artillery fire being exchanged in the background here. Vislac is now moving in to this gatehouse, looking to take on the forces of paladinbob and begin to push his way through to the eastern portion of the city and assist his two allies. These hillmen, I think, are going to really struggle against these Rhovanion Gadrots. These Rhovanion Gadrots are reasonably well armored, but they are definitely a couple tiers above the hillmen, who are now already considering the possibility of routing. Over here, these poor Corsairs have really gotten themselves cut up, although now that they are, I think, more or less out of range of the Javelins, or the Javelins are either out of ammo or have their attention engaged elsewhere, he's starting to pull it back just a little bit. I think these Corsairs are going to lose, but they're going to take a lot of those Gondor militia with them. But the rest of Archangel's forces just kind of holding steady. He's being very, very cautious with his deployment, getting rid of some of his weaker forces like the Hillmen and the Sword Militia first. Moving back over onto my side, things are getting real messy on the walls. My two units of Corsairs have managed to reverse the Gondorian encirclement, where they have now cut down a large number of those Gondorian militia. They are unfortunately pinned in place by a unit of Swan Knights and some Gondor infantry as well, and basically elsewhere my forces have been more or less rebuffed. I've got a unit of Corsair pikemen here holding their own well enough against the Gondorian infantry. Could see more and more of my infantry now beginning to wreak a little bit of havoc here on the back lines. These two artillery units have been completely silenced by the presence of my Corsair warriors, who are now moving in to the archer militia. And you can see more and more of my warriors now pouring out of that siege tower and down into the second level. We've effectively surrounded a large portion of the defending infantry by being very, very aggressive, which is going to oblige rules, and I believe paladinbob as well, in fact, to bring in some of the cavalry that they conserved earlier. And this is a really big problem for me. I've only got a tenuous foothold. It's not all that great. And if I lose this this foothold, it may be very difficult for me to get another one, because I think that the trick of opening those holes in his lines is really only going to be able to be played once. Once I lose my forces in here, then rules is going to slam the doors shut on me. So my pikemen now moving into position to assist my Corsair warriors if they need it. These Doranirno Lancers are going to flee in the face of the large pikeman presence here that I have on the inside of the walls. So now is the time for something decisive. I've definitely got the forces in place, so I need to be very, very quick with how I deploy my infantry. You can see more and more forces now pouring into the siege tower, looking to assist the rest of my army in pushing back the forces of rules. Really, there's almost no fighting going on at the gatehouse, because that is a slaughter for me. I have a few better options, I think, than banging my head against that particular wall. Moving on over here, it looks like paladinbob's not doing too bad, in fact, against Vislac. Vislac is really committing hard, looking to push back these light Gondorian forces and inflict a fairly major defeat on the forces of paladinbob. Back over here, we can see some reinforcements have now moved in to replace those Corsairs, and these Gondor militia are really in a lot of trouble. I don't think there's too many more javelins left for paladinbob to push back this very lightly armored force, so it's really just going to come down to a grinding infantry fight in these two areas. Moving back over here, Man of One Way still struggling to penetrate the defenses of Archangel. He's done a really great job using his javelins and his infantry to pin these guys down and inflict heavy casualties on the Gondorians, but it's just not enough. There's so many heavy Gondorian forces, and he just doesn't have the troops, I think, available to him on this side to really push through them with any amount of efficacy. Archangel's really just kind of really reinforcing the redoubts on the walls, not really giving Wanwei a lot of options. Both of the siege towers are locked down, and the presence of the trebuchet really makes moving up through any of these areas complete and utter suicide. Especially over here, this is really asking for an encirclement. So Man of Wanwei just has to kind of break down the front door, and I think he's doing his best to do that right now. Moving back over here, though, absolute bedlam behind the lines. Rules' forces are surrounded on many sides. There's pockets of my forces that have managed to make it into the city. Got some Castamir chosen here, some of my best, being committed to the fight. Oh, that's really unfortunate. One of the catapults in the background taking down one of Rules' own trebuchets. But these Castamir chosen are basically encircled on several sides, but they are not giving up. Despite the arrow fire, despite the local superiority of enemy troops, they are cutting their way out of the ambush. paladinbob now committing some of his Corsair savages to the some of his Doran Ernal to the fight here to combat my Corsair savages, and they're getting themselves a little bit cut down, I think, for their trouble. These Corsair savages are anti-cavalry, anti-armor, and despite their light armor, they can do very, very well when used properly. Over here, another unit of Castamir is chosen, cutting down these Gondor infantry who do not have a hope or a prayer of beating them in close combat. Archangel has now had to commit a unit of Citadel Guard from the central plaza to try and push back my Haradrim forces inside the first level of the city. Things are really looking a little bit even, though. Despite the more heavily armored, more elite Gondorian troops, my forces are somehow managing to hold them back long enough to inflict significant casualties on them. Over here we can see Rules now moving some of his reinforcements into combat. Some of these Gondor infantry moving into the back of my Castamir's Chosen, who are really having a hard time. Now, over at the gatehouse, I've decided that this is the time to try and push my advantage, and I'm pushing through these Gondorian spearmen with some Blackguard. Over here you can see some of my light Corsairs, who are previously up on that wall, manage again to slip through the net of Rules' forces, and are now charging into the rear of these Gondorian spearmen, who are really going to struggle to hold down the gate. Over here, another unit of Corsairs charging into the rear of these Gondorian light infantry. That is not a fight that they're going to win, but it will help, I think, buy these Castamir's Chosen a little bit of time to continue their bloody work here in the plaza. The guards of Osgiliath now, they were previously quite numerous. They're now down to, I think, about half strength. In the meantime, I've moved up a large number of my archers, looking to just continuously lay down fire against the massed Gondorian ranks. My forces here in the inside are basically serving as a diversion for my archers to just rain down death and destruction upon them. Over here, my Castamir's Chosen have broken through the Gondorian infantry, now moving into the flank of the Citadel Guard, but Rules has moved up a unit of his Rhovanion hunters and is going to begin to toss javelins into the side and rear. A really nice section of enfilading fire going into my poor Castamir's Chosen. They're doing their best, but they are really, really hard-pressed at this point. Elsewhere on the battlefield, looks like paladinbob has actually had to abandon his trebuchet piece. I think he might be trying to retreat what's left of it across the water, so about 2/3 of that unit now have been rendered ineffective, and Vislak is very, very aggressively pushing through this gatehouse. There is a unit of Gondor infantry that was left behind here. That's a very wise decision on the part of paladinbob. There's a lot of lighter forces in here, and in shield wall formation, these Gondorian infantry will hold out for an extremely long time in that very narrow choke point. Over here, the Hillmen have managed to clean up that first unit of Gondor militia, but they are exhausted in the attempt. Whereas this Gondor militia and this Rhovanion hunter unit are both fresh. If he decides to push forward with the rest of his Hillmen, then I think they're going to find themselves very, very much overmatched. Vislak now moving in the rest of his forces, looking to press his advantage and continuously push through the forces of paladinbob that are now very, very thin on the ground. Over here, it looks like Man of One Way still trying to break through this gate. He's really doesn't have a lot of options. Every means of attack that he has to him is essentially covered by the forces of Archangel. An extra tower would be really welcome, I think, at this point, but unfortunately one of them was dropped before it could reach the walls. Man of One Way, though, still has a fairly healthy force, still has a few options, I think, available to him in order to break through that gate. These Gondorian spearmen can only hold out for so long against a sustained missile barrage, so I think now would be the time to potentially move in any more of his Pelargir Marines to try and break this wall down. Because if he doesn't, he is not going to be able to get through here and pursue a successful assault of the city. Moving back over here, things are starting to turn around quite a lot. paladinbob has brought in more of his cavalry, charged into the rear of my poor Corsairs who have been absolutely annihilated, and he actually managed to get into my Corsair Blackguards as well, who are now getting themselves very, very efficiently cut down by the Gondorian spears. These Gondorian spears bravely held their ground in the face of overwhelming odds and were rewarded for their discipline with the arrival of reinforcements. These Gondorian infantry over here have managed to, alongside the guards of Osgiliath, destroy what remains of my Castamir's Chosen, who are now just being skewered by those merciless Osgiliath spearmen. Over here, things are going a hell of a lot better. I've managed to move another unit of reinforcement in, some Hashari Shadows, potentially to combat these Rhovanion hunters, and maybe even soak up a little bit more of their Javelin Fire. My Castamir's Chosen over here really struggling in the face of more Gondorian reinforcements. Looks like we have some out of ammunition Gondorian archers. I think there's about 2 units in there. These guys were previously occupying this plaza over here, and now they have been committed to the melee by rules to try and hold back my my assaulting forces. He still has a reasonable, I think, amount of troops in reserve, but I have successfully managed to keep his artillery pieces rather out of the battle for an extremely long time. Trying to assault with his artillery pieces active would have been absolute suicide. So that is, I think, a big victory for my attacking forces. Things are starting to look a little bit dire, though. Most of my infantry, I think, has been committed to the fight. Got some Castamir's Ragers and things like that outside the cavalry, alongside my Serpent bodyguard. But I've also got another unit of Castamir's Chosen over here. But that's essentially it. And Rules has no lack of infantry at this point. So it's a very difficult situation. I think we did the best that we could, but it seems like it's really going to be downhill from here, given the complete lack of the forces that I have available to continuously assault the city. So I'm now moving my Castamir's Chosen off of that wall, not wanting to lose them. To a flanking maneuver by Rules' forces, which he definitely has the ability to do at this point. So luckily I'm going to manage to get them all off of there before anything bad can happen to them. I can keep them in reserve for a little while longer. Moving back over to Vislak's side of the battle, things are looking pretty good. He has managed to cut his way through most of paladinbob's army, but this unit of Gondorian infantry still stands strong. And I think he's going to start to move his Pelargir Marines up and potentially begin to bombard them, trying to make it a little bit easier for himself, which I think is a good idea. He does also have another option here. He could potentially flank the forces of paladinbob. All he has to do is get rid of these 2 units of Gondor Militia and Rhovanion Hunters. But if he can manage to do that, then he'll be able to sweep around to the back of this gatehouse and push his way through those stalwart Gondorian defenders. Back here, paladinbob has removed the rest of his forces. He's got his Citadel Guard here to hold the crossing. What remains of them, in any case, to hold the crossing against any further attempts by Vislak. So a nice tiered, layered defense here on the part of paladinbob's defenders. Over here, it looks like some of Man of Wanway's Gondorians... this is Vislak's cavalry. He managed to push them through the gate and silence one of Archangel's trebuchets. I didn't even realize that this had happened. That is a game changer for Man of Wanway, who is now able to come through a postern gate with a significant portion of his forces. Over here, it looks like a big cavalry fight went down, which I think saw the end of quite a lot of Man of Wanway's forces alongside those of Vislak. But Archangel's battalions on this side have been completely shattered. Some very, very vicious melee fighting obviously took place over here. And it looks like, actually, Archangel came out on top with his unit of Guards of Osgiliath. So it's really about 50-50 at this point. I've got some Pelargir Marines here fighting hard against Gondor Militia, but I think they're going to really struggle to get in there and push through these guys with two arrow towers firing at them simultaneously. Over here, Man of Wanway is trying to brute force the gate. I think he is now completely out of javelins and really, really struggling hard. These Pelargir Marines don't have what it takes to push through these heavily armored Gondorian spearmen alongside some of these Guards of Osgiliath, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Man of Wanway has managed to bring over at least 1 or 2 battalions of his Gondor militia, and I think he's going to bring them very, very shortly into the forces of Archangel. We're going to head and slow down just a little bit here and pass back over to my side of the battle. Things are very, very bloody. I've now fallen back with most of my forces outside of the gates, but the Gondorians are being very aggressive. They're now moving out, engaging my infantry with their Swan Knights, holding down my most important unit of elite infantry. And at the same time, they're now bringing forward all of their cavalry units that they have available to them. I've got a unit of General's Bodyguard. I think there's going to be a few more that come out as well. Yeah, I can see some of the I don't know how to say that. Eowatha Horse Guards are going to be coming up to try and support these General's Bodyguards in running down my archers. My Castamir's Rangers are going to put up a decent fight, though. Rule's trying to get his General's Bodyguard clear of there so we can line up a nice charge, but I'm going to punish him for it with 3 units of elite archers, and they're just cutting down those poor General's Bodyguard and dealing HP damage to the survivors. My Castamir's Rangers now falling back, looking to seek cover behind the lines. My Serpent Bodyguard moving in to try and check the advance of more of Rules' cav. We got a unit of Rhovanion Rider here, very, very powerful. Very, very powerful in the charge, but very lightly armored. Not a match for my Serpent Bodyguards at all. but there's just so much cavalry out here that's really an absolute... it's a total nightmare, honestly. This is like the worst case scenario. I've got cavalry within striking distance of my archers and nothing that I can use to stop them. But luckily for me, I'm going to have an opportunity to get a couple volleys off, and Rules' bodyguard is going to take some fairly hefty damage in the charge. Over here, I've still got a unit of Castamir's Rangers who are able to fire into Zeawatha Horse Guards, and they have claimed the lives of quite a lot of them. My Castamir's Chosen fighting hard against these dismounted Swan Knights, actually managing to beat them back, believe it or not. Cutting down many of them, despite being outnumbered, and actually outclassed in terms of raw stats. Back here, my Corsair Blackguards have fallen back, and things are not looking great for me. The Zeawatha Horse Guards, what remains of them, a mere 6 of them, although more than enough to menace my catapult, are now in amongst my catapult crew. Rules is trying to silence one of the most important pieces of my army. I don't really have anything in the area that I can use to cut him down. And it looks like Rules' general has now fallen in combat. That is a big deal for us. We have an opportunity here, I think, to potentially rout some of the more important forces. But Rules has seen what is happening. He kind of realizes the way that the wind is blowing. And he's going to be relentless in his attempts to take out my catapult, which is now very, very foolishly charging into battle against those cavalry units. But we are going to manage to rout the Zeawatha Horse Guards, and my very, very swift Corsair Blackguards are going to try and move in, I think, to cut down those what remains of the General's bodyguard and try and spare these poor catapult crewmen the worst of it. Most of them are managing to get away. I still have a very healthy unit of bodyguards, so I need to get that bodyguard unit moving and try and shut down what remains of Rules' cavalry. And they are now going to do exactly that. More of my forces falling back. My Castamir's Rangers managed to come out of that scrap very, very healthy. I think they all have at least 90 men in the unit, and they start with about 102. So light casualties, but still very much combat effective. Back over here inside the city, my Hashari Shadows are cutting down what remains of these Gondorian archers. But unfortunately, because of the disastrous sally for the Gondorian forces, they now have local superiority once again inside of this first level of the Citadel. So things could very, very quickly turn around in their favor. Going to go ahead and slow it down, check the side of the battle, and take a look at what Vislac is up to. He's being very, very cautious, not wanting to overcommit or get his forces into a place where they could be massacred. Over here we can see the Hillmen have now moved into position, looking to take on these Gondor militia and the Rhovanion hunters, but I think they're really struggling. They had the numbers to do a lot of damage to these guys, and indeed they had, I think, about half the unit out of each of these guys is missing. We can see more and more of Vislac's forces now beginning to pour through these gaps. It looks like paladinbob actually retreated his unit of Gondorians across the river, and I don't think they're going to be able to participate in that combat. So Vislac is now free to move his forces into the eastern half of the city, which is a big victory, I think, for the attackers. Over here, the forces of Archangel have been outflanked. They're being pinned in place. This is a really nice move here by Man of Wanway. Pinned in place by some Spear Militia and some men of Lasarnak, and shot in the rear with some of his elite archers. These affiliate rangers are going to do absolute work, and look at this massed volley fire coming in from the Blackroot Vale archers, absolutely massacring these poor Osgiliath pikemen. But I did see some shots coming in from the Trebuchet over here. Looks like Archangel is still very much in a good position. He's well in command of this portion of the city. He has had to fall back, but not without inflicting very, very heavy casualties on his foes. Over here at the Gatehouse, things are starting to turn around in favor of Man of Wanway. He has managed to push his way through, albeit by the looks of things at a very great loss to his forces. Looks like those two units of Gondorian militia rather were beaten back by the spearmen and the guards of Osgiliath. Obliging Man of Wanway to commit the rest of his heavy infantry. I don't think he really has a whole lot left outside. He's got some Gondorian infantry, which is a great thing to have in reserve, and some Pelargir Marines, who I think are out of ammunition. There's also my two units of cavalry over here that I should honestly, this is a mistake on my part, I should be using them to try and just break through these lines here with their superior mass. But honestly, I was really afraid of what those pikes would do to them if I tried to do that. Over here on Vislac's end, things still pretty much the same, although he's managed to bring those Pelargir Marines into the rear of that Gondor militia and the Rhovanion hunters. He's now free to move his entire force through this very narrow choke point and begin to press the positions of paladinbob on the other side of the river. Back on my end, over here at the Trebuchet, this massacre that has taken place around the Trebuchet. I think I can see a few units of Castamir's Chosen still fighting the good fight. 8 of them left to oppose these Swan Knights, and these Swan Knights are now pushing hard against my poor Hashari Shadows, who are very, very isolated and extremely exposed. This flank here, if we could funnel the Swan Knights into the front, we could potentially do a lot of damage to them before we died, but I just don't have the forces left at this point to continuously push into the city. So I'm now trying the same tact that Man of Wanwei was forced to use for about half the battle, trying to shoot down these guards of Osgiliath who are barring my way through the gatehouse into the city. There's still many, many more of them. 77 is quite a lot to have at this late point in the battle. I'm going ahead and we're going to speed up just a little bit. My Castamir's Rangers opening fire, looking to punish any sort of deployment misstep on the part of Rules. If he bunches up his troops, I'm going to focus fire all of my archers on them and try and whittle them down as quickly and effectively as possible. And I think that's what we're gonna start to do over here on these Swan Knights, and is get some nice rear shots. At the same time, Paladinbob moving in some more infantry. I think the Swan Knights, yes, look at this. Defeat is in fact certain. It's headed for the Swan Knights, although it's now switched over to victory. But these Hashari Shadows are doing work. They're just mulching these Gondorian archers, and they will do the same to the Swan Knights. So Paladinbob now bringing in some fresh troops to flank my poor Hashari Shadows, and that is going to be devastation for my poor warriors. I really should have moved them out of there. Big mistake on my part. Over here, Man of Wanwei has managed to move in with what remains of his army. You can see my Serpent Guard now considering their options here, potentially going to move in and try and support the rest of his army. Vislac has now brought in a fairly healthy unit of cavalry, about 35 cavalry militia, but over here this is not good. It looks like they managed to beat back what remained of Wanwei's troops, who were forced to retreat. Mere 36 militia here left to hold these guys in place, while these guards of Osgiliath, despite the fact that they have quite a lot of disadvantages in the face of missile troops, are pushing forward nonetheless. Look at that. Look at those bloodied spears. They are hungry for more, and these lightly armored archers, I think, are going to be very hard-pressed to deal with these guys in close combat. Nonetheless, Man of Wanwei is going to move his troops forward and look to get a nice flank charge off on the guards of Osgiliath. Now, what do we got going on over here? It looks like some of Archangel's Gondor militia is coming face-to-face with a unit of Gondorian infantry, and these guys are going to absolutely butcher these forces. I think Archangel is just trying to whittle down Juan's troops. His very, very weakened army at this point is not going to be a match for everything that Archangel still has at his disposal. The unit of guards of Osgiliath here backed up by some Gondorian infantry and some Gondorian militia, alongside a large number of archers and a trebuchet. Not an easy position for Juan to be in at all. Back over here, Archangel's bodyguard. Looks like they have moved themselves into a fairly central position, so they're able to reinforce where they're needed, which is a good plan on his part. But they're sitting idle at the moment. I think they're quite confident in their ability to beat down my poor Hashari Shadows. I have managed to do a fair amount of damage to these dismounted Swan Knights, and a little bit of damage in return to the Gondorian infantry, but just not enough. You can see the remains of a sally here by my Castamir's Chosen, who are essentially running a feint in favor of getting these Corsair Blackguards into the first level and trying to move over and flank the Swan Knights and what remains of the Citadel Guard. A risky maneuver, and at the same time you can see a lot of arrow fire now pouring in to the rear of these Swan Knights. At the same time, they're going to take a big charge from the rear. Oh, nope, never mind. Looks like the Blackguards are going to turn around. Not really liking the position they're in. Probably something to do with all of that arrow fire. Luckily for me, another little micro mistake here on the part of Rules. His Gondorian guards of Osgiliath are actually going to pursue my Castamir's Chosen outside of the gates, who are going to turn around, reform, and countercharge them. Rules now sees the mistake that he's made, and he's going to push back into the city. Although there is an opportunity here, I think, for a rear charge. Over here, these Swan Knights have managed to deal with what remains of my Hashari Shadows, and these poor Corsair Blackguards really don't have anywhere else for them to go. So what they're going to do is try and move around this way so that the Gondorian Knights face their backs to the arrow fire, so we can have a little bit more success in cutting them down. You can see a fair amount of damage being done to these poor Swan Knights, who really don't have anywhere to go at this point. Moving back over to Vislac's army, it looks like he's beginning to sally forward and take the fight to Paladinbob across the river. We're going to go ahead and speed it up just a little bit so we can see the result of that. We've got a little bit of time. Let's take a look at the forces of Man of Wanwei and how they are faring against the hardened army of Archangel. All those guards of Osgiliath had just massacred these poor Blackroot Vale archers. Unfortunately, they just aren't able, even when surrounding them like this, they aren't able to penetrate the very thick plate armor of those extremely elite Osgiliath pikemen.
Enemy force remains. We must pray they lose their will to fight.
Over here, Valacar has brought in a large number of his Pelargir Marines, fairly decent light infantry, and another unit of Freemen here now moving forward. All these poor Citadel Guard. Looks like Valacar still has a card to play. His Pelargir Marines still have a fairly significant amount of ammunition. They're going to begin to bombard these Citadel Guard. Although maybe that was their last volley. But as just like a big tide charging out of the river, the forces of Valacar are going to swarm against the Citadel Guard and envelop them on two flanks. Things looking very grim here for the forces of paladinbob. I don't think he's got the men really to hold this area down. His trebuchet crew now charging into the flank of these Pelargir Marines, but I think they're going to find themselves very, very quickly repulsed by that powerful infantry unit. Or reasonably powerful infantry unit in any case. paladinbob now bringing what remains of his cavalry into the fight. Charging into the rear of those Pelargir Marines, getting a lot of kills. Look at that. So many of those Pelargir Marines now have been cut down. I think about 20 of them in the space of like 10 seconds. Very, very impressive. paladinbob really putting up a magnificent stand here with very, very few troops. But Valacar is not going to be denied. He is moving in the rest of his forces through this gap here, just muscling their way through the ranks of the Citadel Guard and pushing in to the Archer Militia in the back. paladinbob now being obliged to commit what remains of his General's bodyguard, moving into battle against his Heavy Axemen. But honestly, I think this is the kind of engagement that the Heavy Axemen want to be in. And they've also got some Pelargir Marine backup. This could be the end of paladinbob's general and a significant portion of his force besides. I don't think he has too much left at this point. He's got some Archer Militia over there. Some Citadel Guard. Oh, that's Archangel Citadel Guard. But he's got some infantry over here as well. But it looks like my forces have managed to push through. We've broken the Gondor infantry and cut down the Swan Knights. My Serpent Bodyguard now free to do whatever it is that they need to continue to put pressure on the Gondorian defenders. All my Castamir's Rangers now brought inside the city. Looks like we're shooting at some of the Rhovanion hunters from paladinbob up on the wall, looking to keep those towers activated. Rule's now charging into battle with what remains of his Archer Militia. My Castamir's Rangers are going to oblige him, and they are going to break almost instantly. So, despite our heavy losses, we have managed to inflict a fairly significant defeat on our enemies over on this side, and we are now very, very much in control of this first level of the city. Although, unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of heavy infantry left to speak of. I think I've got maybe 5 or 6 of my Castamir's Chosen still left to carry on the fight. Over here, my catapult's just kind of sitting outside. I'm trying to be as cautious as possible with my catapult, because I know it's going to be important later in the battle, and I don't want to lose it to a surprise attack from potentially one of the smaller units of infantry still in the battle. Oh, there you go. There's my Castamir's Chosen. Those Gondorian archers routing right through them, getting himself knocked into the next world in a very comical fashion by one of my heavy infantrymen. This leaves the town center for the Gondorians very, very open, although unfortunately in this version of the scenario, it's kind of more of a test version, I think. There is no countdown timer. So even if I move forces into here, this central plaza with all the flags and such is not really strategically that important. paladinbob still has a unit of Rhovanion Gadrops here. They were looking to contest the, or at least to block the movement of my Serpent Bodyguards, but they're getting themselves gunned down by my Castamir's Rangers in response. Now many of them are going to have to flee after losing, I think, about half the unit. Archangel now moving around with his General's Bodyguard, possibly looking to penetrate one of my flanks. He knows I don't have a lot of heavy infantry, and I have a very, very understrength unit of Serpent Bodyguard, at least compared to his very, very healthy General's Bodyguard. So he's going to probably try and leverage that advantage to its full extent and shut down my army after their very, very hard-won success. It's just so rude. Over here, paladinbob now moving in to support that push from the General's Bodyguard. This is quite a dire situation. Luckily for me, I do see that it's happening, so I am going to start to deploy my forces consequently. I've got a unit of Castamir's Rangers here now moving up onto the wall where they are immune from that General's Bodyguards, and I've also got a couple units of my Castamir's Rangers over here in more or less a firing position to rain death and destruction upon the Gondorian defenders as they move up this alleyway. I've also moved my unit of Serpent Bodyguard in there to check a sudden assault from his cavalry, so things, I think, are going to turn around potentially in my favor. Let's go ahead and let's speed up just a little bit and witness the fate of these Gondorian militia. can see my Castamir's Rangers now moving in, forming a firing line, looking to just scythe through these Gondorians as they move into the plaza. So there's still a little bit of cavalry here from paladinbob, 2 very brave cavalrymen charging in, looking to get a nice hit off on my general's bodyguard. But I'm going to deny them that engagement, opting instead to try and draw them back a little bit farther and potentially deny them a nice charge into the rear of my unit. I've also got, I think my Castamir's Chosen are hanging out in there somewhere, potentially looking to come in and help the general's bodyguard. These poor Gondor militia are just getting themselves gunned down by those elite archers. Things not looking great for their offensive sally on that side. Over here, Vislac has managed to push all the way through paladinbob's defenses, albeit at a very, very great cost. That one unit of Citadel Guard held their ground admirably well. Vislac just, I don't think, really has the quality of units to really push through them effectively. But push through he has done nonetheless, and he is now bringing a large number of his forces into the city to try and offer me a little bit of aid. Over here, he actually has a vanguard unit, some of his Gondorian infantry moving into position, looking to check the advance of Archangel's bodyguard. Archangel is now going to have to pull out of this fight in response to that, which is going to leave those Gondorians high and dry, and they have been almost completely annihilated. Look at that; those poor militiamen really just don't have a hope or a prayer. Up here, some of the remaining Rhovanion hunters from paladinbob are getting themselves into a bit of a scrap here with my Castamir's Rangers, and some of them are actually dying. This is working out fairly well for them. It's not so bad to trade 17 Rhovanion hunters for even a handful of Castamir's Rangers. Moving over to Man of One Way side of things, really just bloodshed all over the place, absolute bedlam. Man of One Way doesn't really have a whole lot of an army left at this point, unfortunately. Certainly nothing capable of pushing its way through this mighty force here commanded by Archangel. He's going to need to kind of bide his time, I think, for a little bit and wait for some reinforcements to come from elsewhere in the city. And that could potentially be a reality very, very soon, because really only Archangel, I think, has forces left. paladinbob still has some Rhovanion Gadrots here, but most of his infantry is gone, and most of Rules' force as well have been gunned down. Big cavalry charge here by paladinbob's heavy cavalry into my poor Castamir's Rangers, who are just getting themselves absolutely gunned down. So about 41 now left in that unit, well over half the unit being annihilated in a single charge. Unfortunately, I didn't see it fast enough, and so my Serpent Bodyguards are going to be late to respond, and they're not going to be able to catch those dastardly attackers and do what needs to be done. Over here, my Castamir's Rangers have managed to push back what remains of those Rhovanion Hunters, so they're pretty much not a threat at this point. In fact, taking a quick bird's eye view here, most of the Gondorians have been pushed back very, very heavily, and now Vislac is able to move in with the rest of his army. He's got a fair amount of forces here, and some of them, I think about 2 or 3 units are Gondorian infantry, which is really, really important, because that's going to play a big role, I think, in pushing hard against Archangel's forces. So if we can manage to reunite all of our forces on and bring them to bear against this central plaza, then we can potentially fight Archangel on more or less equal grounds. We're going to go ahead and we're going to speed up just a little bit here. Looks like Archangel's bodyguard has got itself shot up a little bit. There's a few missing men out of that bodyguard unit. paladinbob now moving over with his general's bodyguard, looking to contest the territory with Vislac's army, looking to cut down some of those Gondorian infantry. That would be a very big loss for Vislac if that came to pass. I'm not too sure what I'm doing at the moment. Looks like, yes, I can see what Vislac's doing, and I'm moving in with some of my Serpent Bodyguard to potentially give them a little bit of a hand. But now I'm actually going to pull them back. I think that's probably because of the presence of Archangel's Bodyguard here, not wanting to get my my General's Bodyguard in locked in a deadly confrontation with a much more numerous General's Bodyguard unit. Over here, unfortunately, a little bit of friendly fire, it would appear. Yeah, that's probably on the part of my archers, firing at paladinbob's General's Bodyguard, killing some of my own ally, unfortunately, to the tune of almost 20 of his very, very valuable and much-needed Gondorian infantry. So big mistake on my part right there. Over here, paladinbob now moving in with his bodyguard. I think he's just going for a glory charge, or potentially to do more damage to my Castamir's Rangers. We're now opening fire on them, gunning down many of these brave Gondorians as they charge forward. Satisfied now with this equal fight, I'm going to move in with my Serpent's Bodyguard and try and move my archers out of that combat. So a very desperate struggle going on here now. Paladin Bob's bodyguard, I think, is definitely getting the worst of it, and many of my archers now charging into combat to give my general's bodyguard the edge that they need to cut these guys down quickly and still preserve the numbers within my very, very important heavy cavalry unit. Just a little quick update on these guys. They're still just kind of sitting here. I think this is really a foolish thing on my part. I could move them into the city, and I could potentially try and use them to support a push from Man of Wanway. But honestly, at this point, I think I've kind of forgotten about them because there wasn't a whole lot that I could do with them for most of the game. Over here in the heart of the Gondorian forces, Archangel's now peeling off some of his infantry. You can see a couple units of Gondorian infantry now moving in with some Citadel Guard, and looks like Paladin Bob's general just got cut down by my Serpent Guard. But alongside his Citadel Guard, he's got some Gondor Archer Militia moving in to flank Vislak's Gondorian infantry as they move in to take that central plaza. And of course, this is going to oblige a general charge on the part of what remains of Vislak's forces, some Gondorian infantry, a very healthy unit right there, of 145 charging into battle alongside some Gondorian spearmen. This is really unfortunate, I think, because these buildings don't really count as buildings. This whole area is wide open, so Archangel's going to be able to assemble, I think, some archer forces very, very shortly and begin to open fire on Vislak's lines while they're locked in place by the Citadel Guard and those archer militia. Over here, I'm running my Serpent Bodyguards through to the city plaza, looking to cut down some of these archer militia. But also, at this point, I haven't realized that this plaza is not an important strategic location. My plan originally was to take this, start the timer, and oblige Archangel to pull some of his forces away from this front and kick me out of the town square, potentially giving Man of Wanway the opening that he needs to push through this very formidable defensive line. But unfortunately, there was no such timer, and thus our plan was not really all that sound. So now I'm going to have to flee with my cavalry in the face of these archer militia. And there's a very big general struggle going on over here in the central plaza. You can see Gondorians fighting Gondorians, cutting each other down. Archangel's bodyguard now charging into combat. Mine is just trying to get clear of the fighting, but unfortunately goes right through some Citadel Guard spear units alongside that general's bodyguard. You can see a lot of them now beginning to drop. I had about 18 in the bodyguard to begin with. There's now 16 of them left, and I think it's only going to get worse from there. Yeah, now down to 15. Over here, it looks like poor Vislak's catapult has now been neutralized by some unknown assailant. He just doesn't have anything left here to really give him the advantage I think he needs on Archangel. Despite the Citadel Guard being surrounded, it says that victory is a certainty for them. I think that's because they are warmed up and everyone else around them is very tired or worse. Over here, these Gondorian militia really doing a great job, I think, at cutting down some of the... I think there was some militia from Vislak here. It's really hard to tell because there's so many of the same units. But in support of whatever is in that blob, there is now some freemen moving in to charge into the rear of those Gondorian militiamen. Archangel is now fallen back and set up a couple units of his archers, and this is where it's gonna really get deadly for poor Vislak. There's some enfilading fire now going in to the rear of this Gondorian infantry unit, and that's gonna really turn the... oh wow. Listen to that. That is one of the custom general bodyguard abilities that will increase the fighting capacities of your units on the field in one way or another. But I digress. These poor Gondorian infantry under Vislak are just getting hammered in the back by those Gondor archers. I've now moved in with some of my own forces looking to put some enfilading fire into that Gondor militia unit, potentially rout that flank, allowing them to surround the Citadel Guard and break them. I think a better use of these archers would be to move in here and try and contest the field with those Gondorian archers. If I move them in there quick enough, Archangel may not see them, and I might be able to deal a lot of damage to them before they can respond. Over here, the forces of Vislak really beginning to fail. The reinforcements from Archangel, basically fresh, alongside a understrength unit of Citadel Guard, are just pushing through the exhausted warriors of Vislak, who really aren't liking that engagement and might start routing. So our hopes from victory now have really been turned to ashes, essentially, because we weren't able to pull enough of Archangel's forces away from that front in order to give Man of Wanway the opportunity that he needs. In response, Man of Wanway is just going to go for it. He's now moving in his Gondorian infantry to take on these guards of Osgiliath in a head-on fight. Very, very brave of them. and there's really nothing that they have left, I think, at this point. You see just a trail of his dead Gondorians now littering the field as the one remaining contingent of Gondorian archers, the two rather, focus fired on them and gunned down probably about 2/3, or at least a third of the unit. Sorry about that, losing my voice a little bit. Back out here, I've still got a couple units of Southron Lancers, but I don't want to move them into either of these areas because Archangel has very wisely kept his Osgiliath pikemen in these two choke points, thereby denying me use of my cavalry yet again. Over here, it looks like Archangel has moved his bodyguard in response to my Serpent Guard. I was looking to try and get into the rear of their forces, go for a little bit of a suicidal glory charge, and try and disrupt some of the archer fire to give Vislac an opportunity to break through here, but there's really nothing left. Most of the Gondorian infantry you're seeing on the field here are Archangel's warriors. There's really nothing left for us, I think, in the central plaza, and that's basically going to be it for us. Over here you can see my or at least two of my 3 units of Castamir's Rangers contesting the town square with some of the Gondor militia under Archangel. These guys are really not in a good formation to be fighting my elite archers. You can see some catapult fire now coming in. I've obviously moved in my catapult, taken down a ton of those archers. So we are just butchering the Gondorians here in this town square. This is really a very bad place, I think, for these archer militias to be. They're not going to be able to stand up to this very ferocious bombardment for too much longer. But honestly, pardon me, honestly, this is just a bit of a pointless diversion, I think. What I should be doing is shooting my archers into the back of these Gondorian infantry, but I kind of forgot that I could fire directly through the buildings, so I was thinking that I had to kill these guys in the center first, and then try and position them to get a decent shot at the rear of the Gondorian infantry in this little corner over here. But yeah, things really not looking great for the attackers. They're starting to run out of steam here. There's not a whole lot left from any of our armies. The percentage is looking to be about 83% to 92%. Very, very bloody for the Gondorians. About 2/3 of their army were wiped out, but it's just not enough. Man of Wanway just desperately... I think that's Vislac's general. That is very, very unfortunate. But Man of Wanway's Polar Gear Swordsman and Sword Militia just desperately trying to push through the Osgiliath Guard pike block, but it's just not enough. Those archers are relentless. We have managed to do a little bit of damage to them. I think possibly the Athelian Rangers from Man of Wanway have moved in to contest the field with these archers. Someone certainly was shooting them, but it's just not enough, and it's a little bit too late, I think. This unit of 100 Gondor archers is basically intact, and there's really nothing that we can do to them at this point to give Man Wanway the support that he needs to push through the Osgiliath pikemen. Back over here at this fight, the forces of Vislac have basically been completely annihilated, and I've moved in my Castamir's Rangers to try and hold the line long enough for me to get a few more parting volleys off on the Gondorian infantry. Over here, it looks like my catapult trying to move itself into a decent position to try and hit some of those Citadel Guard and Gondor infantry. Although they may still be focusing their attention on this archer militia. Let's fast forward just a little bit and see exactly what's going on here. Yeah. See some more non-flaming catapult shots going into these archer militia. Again, not the best target for that catapult. There is an opportunity here, even though I might hit some of my own troops, to butcher this Gondorian infantry. My Serpent Bodyguard, now having returned from their little promenade here along this boulevard, have now moved in to try and launch some hammer and anvil strikes against the Gondorian infantry. We had only really managed to get one off, dealing only light casualties to our enemies before the Bodyguard of Archangel was able to respond to that. And they are now locked in a fight with my Serpent Bodyguard. And there goes Man of Wanway's general. My general, which I presume is Castamir, really the only one left on the field at this point, and that is not going to be the case for too much longer. You can see my Serpent Bodyguard putting up a valiant struggle against the Gondorians, but there's just not enough of them left to really do what needs to be done. These Gondorians just cutting them down, taking fairly heavy casualties, though, in return. I think there was about 30 or 27 of these guys in this fight, compared to the 10 of my Serpent Guard, who are now down to 6. So we've managed to deal about 10%, or about 10 casualties to these guys, but I just don't think it's going to be enough. Although, maybe not. Look at these guys. They are just dropping. He's losing about 3 or 4 horsemen for every one of mine. Very, very favorable engagement for these Serpent Guard. I didn't expect them to do nearly as well as they did. A lot of dead horses there. And brave warriors that they are. You can see them now charging forward. My general at the head of them, looking to get a piece of Eldacar. Castamir absolutely fearless, even in the face of defeat. Over here, it looks like one of the guards of Osgiliath have been pulled off of their post, and in response, I'm going to just slowly walk my cavalry through this area. There is what do you call them, like spikes or pikes in this area, but if you walk through them, then you do not take any damage from them. Although any troops, look at that, trying to run through will get themselves very, very quickly skewered. But as long as you walk through them, you will take no damage. So I've now moved my Southron Lancers in to silence the Trebuchet of Archangel. This is just one final attack against Archangel's forces. There's going to be no way that I can push through there with my cavalry, especially given the presence of this large number of infantry and the guards of Osgiliath. But nonetheless, we're going to go for a few little spiteful kills here. You can see my Serpent Guards now doubling back around, clearing out any potential ambushes, and now charging in face on against the Gondorian archers. Not getting the best charge though. Managing to kill a few of them, but yeah, really not all that effective. Actually going to lose 1 or 2 Serpent Guard in response. My Southron Lancers have now mopped up what remains of that Trebuchet crew, but my Serpent Guard Lancers are going to wheel back around and get a nice charge here. Let's watch. Look at that. Devastation. This poor Gondor archer unit has no defense, unfortunately. And many of them are just going to get cut right down. About 3/4 of the unit, I think, is going to fall in the first few seconds. And these poor archers are just going to take horrendous casualties in the face of that cavalry charge. But unfortunately for me, it is all in vain because there's really no way that I can get through here to help what remains of my army and Vislak's army. My final unit of Castamir's Rangers, or my final Castamir's Ranger in that unit, now being cut down. And over here, it looks like, yes, the revenge of rules. He has now moved in with his remaining Gondor militia units. They have somehow managed to band together with a few survivors, and they have silenced my poor, poor catapult. So there's really nothing I can do. Potentially, I could have dealt with these guys with archers and then brought my catapult around this way to blow some holes in these defensive positions, but alas, it is not to be. Over here, my general is now charging into combat, getting himself cut down in a final blaze of glory. Him and his last 4 horsemen charged in here, dealt a lot of damage to these Gondorian militia, but unfortunately, it was just not enough. So Castamir the Usurper King has fallen on the field of battle. Eldacar standing here victorious over the body of his foe. We're really down to the final stages of the battle. I don't really think I have anything left at this point. I don't know where the rest of my Castamir's Rangers are. I think they might have gotten potentially run down by a cavalry charge that we might have missed. But really, everything I've got left is concentrated over here. My Southron Lancers have now charged into the battle against these Gondorian archers. My Serpent Guard now coming in to the rear to give them a little bit of a hand. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fast forward a little bit. My Southron Lancers charging into battle. My plan here was to try and draw him out of position, potentially making him make a little bit of a mistake by not putting them in guard mode. But unfortunately, they are now in guard mode, as that is the formation you will see when a unit is in guard mode by default. So really, there's nothing left for me to do at this point except to charge my warriors bravely into battle and go for glory. I'm not sure where the rest of my Serpent Guard have gone. Oh yeah, here they are. They've fallen back a little bit, looking to get some room for a charge. You can see that charge now about to happen into the front of these pikes, but it is just suicide. There's nothing that they can do. So my Southron Lancers have now been routed off the field by those guards of Osgiliath, who are standing firm. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fast forward it just a little bit here and witness the end for these very brave but slightly suicidal Serpent Guard. It even says that victory seems certain for them. I think they were doing reasonably well against the guards of Osgiliath, managing to cut down 1 or 2 of them, or potentially that's based on their performance against the archers that are inside of them, backing them up. Yeah, my poor, poor Serpent Guard. Alas, alas, alas. Songs will be sung about their bravery, however, and possibly also about their stupidity. Looks like Rules has now brought what remains of his archers, looking to get a little bit of a cheeky revenge on my poor Serpent Guard, who are just getting themselves absolutely butchered here. But eventually I am going to be able to see this, and hold on. It's going to happen. And my poor Serpent Guard now down to a mere 3. They see what's happening, and those last 2 Serpent Guardsmen are going to charge into Rules' archers and cut them down as quickly as possible, and effectively destroying what remains of Rules' force on the field. So we've now completely defeated his army. That's, I think, the best that these Serpent Guard can hope for. So they're going to charge themselves now back into battle and try to cut down some of these Gondorian archers as well. Just trying to kill as many people as possible. The Gondorians aren't going to have it. They're not going to watch their brothers be butchered. And they're going to sally forward and try and stop the Serpent Guard. The Serpent Guard are going to wheel around for one final charge and cut down as many of these Gondorians as possible before they are completely destroyed themselves. Look at that. He's not doing too bad. A heroic final stand here from this one Serpent Guard. He's taken a lot of wounds, a lot of damage, but he's just not giving up. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take a screenshot of that because that is a beautiful thing right there. Yeah, look at him go. Cutting down Gondorian archers left and right. And that is it. Now 100% of our forces have been cut down. That is going to be the end of Castamir's rebellion. A little bit different than the historical outcome, but I think a little bit expected. The defenders had a lot of really powerful troops, a lot more high-tier units than we did. So I think we did our best given what we had available to us. So Man of Wanway, I think he's the one commanding Calamir. Didn't get too many kills, but honestly, we saw just how bottled up he was. Wasn't really anything that he could do with the quality of units that were at his disposal. Vislac doing pretty well against paladinbob's forces, cutting down 1,100 of them. I managed to get quite a lot of kills there, 3,000. I think a lot of those were like militia kills, however. Let's see here. This must be Archangel's army with 805 men remaining, getting an equally impressive amount of kills, 3,400, cutting down many of Castamir's rebels with his own hands. This, I think, was Paladin Bob's army. About 2,600 of our forces fell before his swords and arrows. And down here we have Rules, who I got really fortunate, I think, with some luck here, and Rules not noticing a few of the sneakier things that I was trying to do. But he still managed to get a very respectable 1,185 kills. That's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. Coming up next, we may have a replay, we may have just kind of some fun community videos, but I also want to continue some of our Let's Play series because we have fallen behind with those in recent weeks. But yeah, that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and let me know down in the comment section. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye!